My name is Pamela Bernhardt, and I'm 31 years old. I design buildings for a living. Clean angles, solid beams, foundations that don't crumble the moment pressure is applied. I used to think people worked the same way, that if you built something slowly, honestly, with good materials, it would last. But relationships aren't steel and concrete. Sometimes they rot from the inside long before anything shows on the surface. For 3 years, I thought my relationship with Aiden Blake was solid, reliable. We were talking about buying a place in the suburbs, adopting a dog, maybe planting the kind of garden old couples brag about. I liked our life. I liked who I was in it. And then everything started shifting quietly at first, like hairline fractures you can't see but can feel under your feet. It started the moment Aiden accepted the account executive role at his firm. A big promotion, more money, bigger responsibility, a team that lived and breathed, work hard, play hard. He came home buzzing with adrenaline every night, talking about the office energy like it was an oxygen tank he couldn't live without. And that was where I first heard her name. Julianne. Not Julie, not Jules, not the sales VP. No, always Julianne, spoken with this subtle, admiring lift in his voice. At first, Julianne was just a name. A senior VP in sales, supposedly legendary at the company, the type who closed multi-million-dollar deals before lunch and then charmed entire teams into celebrating with martinis afterward. Aiden would say things like, Julianne had the wildest idea for the presentation today. Julianne surprised everyone with pastries. You'd like Julianne, she's hilarious. I tried to smile, tried to be the supportive girlfriend. I'm not the jealous type, never have been. I don't go through phones. I don't demand explanations. I believe trust either exists by choice or doesn't exist at all. But then the stories changed, the tone changed, the timing changed. Suddenly Aiden was coming home at 8 p.m., then 9 p.m., then past midnight on weekdays. He'd walk into the apartment smelling like gin and high-end perfume, not mine, and scroll through his phone with this little grin on his face, thumbs tapping while he ignored everything I said. And Julianne's name came up more and more, always casually, always with a laugh, always paired with phrases like, you wouldn't get it, Pam, or it's just work gossip. I tried to believe him. I tried to believe them. But when your partner laughs a little too quickly at someone else's jokes, when their eyes shine in a way they haven't shown for you in months, the floor beneath you shifts just a little. And when you're an architect, you feel every shift. The moment the first deep crack formed was a Tuesday night. We were supposed to be winding down. He was scrolling. I was reading. His phone was on the nightstand next to him, screen facing up. He fell asleep quickly, like he always did after a night out. I was still awake when his phone lit up, illuminating the dark room. I didn't look on purpose. The text was right there, large font, too bright to ignore. Julianne, night, baby. Don't be late tomorrow. My stomach dropped so hard I genuinely felt cold, like my blood had turned to ice water. Baby, with a winking emoji, and the intimate casualness of, don't be late tomorrow, like they had plans together, like this was something more than office chatter. Aiden slept peacefully beside me, while I sat awake staring at the ceiling, replaying that message in my head over and over. It wasn't just the word baby, it was the tone behind it, the familiarity, the confidence, the unsaid claim. The next morning, while he brewed coffee like nothing was happening, I confronted him. Aiden, I said, leaning against the counter, pretending I wasn't shaking. I saw a text pop up on your phone last night, from Julianne. He froze. The spoon clinked against the mug. For a moment he looked startled, not guilty, just annoyed. Then he laughed. Pamela, seriously. Are we doing this? Julianne calls everyone baby. It's a joke. She's European. She's dramatic. He rolled his eyes, that condescending tilt in his voice. Please don't be that kind of girlfriend. I swallowed hard. That kind jealous. Insecure. Controlling. He said those words so sharply it felt like I had been slapped. And somehow suddenly I was the problem in the room. I was the threat to his career, his dignity, his relationship with this golden, untouchable woman who apparently spoke in pet names and emojis as a joke. You're misreading everything he said, shaking his head. Please don't make this weird. That night in bed, he fell asleep instantly. I didn't sleep at all. 2 weeks later, it was time for the annual company gala, the event Julianne had supposedly been preparing Aiden for nonstop. Aiden adjusted his tie in the mirror, looking sharper than I'd seen him in months. Please, he told me, don't be weird about Julianne tonight. She's important. Just be normal. I forced a smile. Sure, normal. But the entire ride there, I felt that same cold weight in my stomach, the same weight I felt when I saw that text. a heavy, sinking dread I couldn't shake. By the time we stepped into the ballroom under glittering crystal chandeliers, I already knew this night wouldn't end the way he imagined. I just didn't know how much it would break me. The ballroom looked like something out of a classic film. Warm gold lighting, polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers reflecting soft glimmers across the room. People in tailored suits and glittering gowns mingled with champagne glasses in hand, and the whole space hummed with the kind of confidence that comes from expensive events where everyone wants to be seen. As we entered, Aiden tightened his grip on my hand, not for comfort, but as a subtle reminder. "Please, Pamela," he muttered, without looking at me. "Just don't make tonight awkward." His tone had that familiar sharp edge I'd grown used to, half warning, half irritation. I answered with a clipped "I said I'd behave," though bitterness rose in my throat. We walked further in, and Aiden immediately scanned the room, searching for her. I wasn't surprised. I spotted Julianne before he did. She stood near the bar, a vision of deliberate elegance, sleek black satin gown, perfectly styled, bob deep red lipstick, and a posture that suggested the entire evening revolved around her presence. The moment her eyes landed on Aiden, her face brightened. She moved toward him with confidence, arms open, and embraced him in a slow, lingering hug that was far too intimate for coworkers. Her hand slid to the lower part of his back in a way that made it clear this wasn't a casual greeting. Aiden welcomed it. Julianne finally turned to me with a polished smile. "You must be Pamela. I've heard things." The pause before things was intentional. I extended my hand, but she didn't take it. She simply looked me over, assessing me like I was a footnote rather than Aiden's partner. The next 20 minutes were excruciating. We joined her circle of colleagues where Aiden and Julianne fell into rapid-fire conversation filled with office jargon, inside jokes, and references I didn't understand. Their chemistry was obvious, a shorthand they seemed proud to display. Whenever Julianne touched his arm, he didn't pull away. When she leaned in close to whisper in his ear, he responded with low laughter. I felt like an outsider observing a private universe that had no room for me. When dinner was announced, we followed the seating chart to table 4, where the inevitable arrangement awaited Julianne, Aiden, and me. Julianne sat on one side of him, I on the other. Aiden pulled out Julianne's chair before she could even start to sit, ignoring me completely. As the meal began, Julianne refilled his wineglass before the server could reach us, brushing her fingers across his wrist each time. He accepted the gesture as though it were perfectly normal. I tried to focus on my food, but their constant eye contact and soft laughter gnawed at me. Halfway through the main course, my napkin slipped to the floor. I leaned down to retrieve it, lifting the heavy tablecloth slightly. The dim space beneath the table allowed just enough light for me to see everything with painful clarity. Julianne's hand rested high on Aiden's thigh, far too high to be accidental. Her fingers were spread with casual possessiveness, and her thumb traced slow circles against the fabric of his suit pants. Aiden wasn't recoiling. His body angled toward her, encouraging the touch. He didn't appear startled or uncomfortable. In fact, he seemed completely at ease. For several seconds, I couldn't move. My hands trembled as I held the napkin, and a cold wave rolled through me, as the truth I had tried so hard to ignore finally presented itself in undeniable form. It wasn't harmless. It wasn't a joke, and it had never been about work culture. This was betrayal bold and unapologetic, happening right in front of me. When I sat up again, the room felt distant, as though I were underwater. Aiden was whispering something to Julianne, and she responded with a soft giggle, brushing her shoulder against his. Their world remained intact and private. I was nowhere inside it. I placed the napkin neatly on the table, stood, and pushed my chair back. Aiden looked up with surprise. "Pamela, where are you going?" "Dessert is coming." "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady and shockingly calm. He leaned toward me with a frustrated hiss. "Sit down. You're causing a scene." I wasn't causing a scene. I was choosing myself. Without another word, I walked out of the ballroom, past the clusters of laughing colleagues and glittering decorations, past every illusion I had been clinging to for months. The lobby's cold lighting felt almost cleansing. I called for the valet, collected my car, and drove home in complete silence. Not angry silence, just the kind that settles in when there is nothing left to argue about, no more excuses to consider. The truth had finally surfaced, and now I had to face it. The drive home felt strangely calm. Not peaceful, just quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in when shock finally turns into clarity. By the time I pulled into the parking garage, the numbness had sharpened into purpose. I walked into the apartment and stood there for a moment, absorbing the familiar silence of a place that had become increasingly unfamiliar to me over the past few months. Then I went to work. I've always been good at compartmentalizing. It's why I excel at architecture. Problems are identified, addressed, and resolved step by step. That night, I applied the same logic to my relationship. I pulled out 2 suitcases from the closet and laid them open on the bed. For a moment, I stared at Aiden's things, remembering the morning coffee routines, the laughter we used to share the plans we once talked about. But nostalgia is a dangerous thing. It blurs the truth, so I pushed it aside. I packed efficiently. Clothes, toiletries, his laptop, shoes, colognes, the jacket he always claimed was lucky during work presentations. I didn't pack everything. I wasn't doing him a favor. I was simply removing the essentials so he'd have no reason to linger. Every fold felt like a closing bracket on a sentence that had dragged on far too long. I placed the suitcases by the front door and waited. It took Aiden nearly an hour to come home. When he burst through the door, he carried the scent of whiskey and entitlement, his expression an irritated mix of confusion and anger. "What the hell was that, Pamela?" he demanded immediately. "You left me at the table. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" He shut the door behind him, still in his suit, still smelling like the gala. When he turned and noticed the neatly arranged suitcases by the entrance, his irritation faltered. What is this?" he asked, brow furrowing. "Are you going somewhere?" "No," I replied, standing from the couch. "You are." Aiden laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound, as if the idea were ridiculous. "Pamela, come on. You're being dramatic. Is this because of dinner?" "Because I was talking to Julianne." I met his gaze with the same quiet steadiness I had walked out of the ballroom with. "It's because I saw her hand on your thigh." He froze. Everything in the room went still. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet. For the first time in months, he looked genuinely startled, but it lasted only a second. Then the pivot began. "What are you talking about?" he said too quickly. "You're imagining things." I dropped my napkin, I answered, keeping my tone even. I bent down to get it. Her hand was on your thigh, high up, and your body was angled toward her. You weren't pulling away, you weren't uncomfortable. Aiden blinked rapidly, his jaw clenching and unclenching. "It was dark," he insisted. "Maybe her hand brushed against me by accident. You're blowing this out of proportion." "She was rubbing your leg," I said. "You were whispering to her." She giggled. "She leaned into you. You did nothing to stop it." His face flushed frustration breaking through. "We had wine, Pamela. It was a chaotic night. It didn't mean anything." "So you admit it happened." He opened his mouth, closed it, then pivoted again. This time his voice softened into a pleading tone. "Pam, please. You're overreacting. It wasn't what you think. I love you. You know that. Don't throw away 3 years over one stupid moment." I shook my head. It wasn't one moment. It was the late nights. The secretive texts. The baby messages. This was just the part you couldn't hide anymore. He stepped closer. "Julianne and I have chemistry at work, okay? But it's professional. She's intense. That's how she is. You're taking everything the wrong way. She calls you pet names. She touches you. You light up around her in ways you haven't around me for months." He exhaled sharply. "So what, you're kicking me out because you're jealous?" "I'm asking you to leave because you betrayed me," I said, and then gaslit me when I felt something was wrong. He stared at me, realizing for the first time that I meant every word. Panic replaced arrogance. "Pamela." "I made a mistake," he said, reaching for my hand. "Please, I can fix this." I stepped back. "Don't touch me." "Pam." "Your bags are by the door," I interrupted gently. "You can stay with a friend or your sister. You can come pick up the rest of your things this weekend when I'm not here. Leave your key." Aiden's expression twisted into something ugly. "You're going to regret this," he spat. "You're throwing away the best thing in your life because of your ego." "Goodbye, Aiden." My voice didn't shake. He grabbed the suitcases and stormed out, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the frame. I walked to the deadbolt, locked it, then slid the chain across. After that, I poured the leftover wine he had bought down the sink, letting it swirl away into nothing. Silence settled again. For the first time in months, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a clean slate. Aiden's friends tried contacting me within days. His sister left voicemails calling me unreasonable. His mother said I was being cruel. His coworker messaged me begging me to be mature. I blocked all of them. I created what I later called my post-breakup Trinity morning gym at 6 late nights at work evenings, in total silence. No dating, no distractions. Just processing, building myself back up, letting the truth settle fully instead of fighting it. In those quiet nights, I realized something important. Aiden hadn't left a void. He had left space, and it was space I badly needed. It was also around that time that a coworker mentioned something interesting, an offhand remark about how Julianne had a reputation for destroying men she got too close to. A comment meant as office gossip, but one that lingered in my mind longer than it should have. It felt like the first whisper of a storm I didn't yet see forming. A month passed, though it felt longer. The routines I'd built for myself, early mornings at the gym, long hours at the office, silent evenings with nothing but my thoughts, slowly reshaped me into someone steadier, clearer, and far less willing to tolerate things that once slipped by under the guise of love. I felt more like myself than I had in years. Meanwhile, I heard nothing from Aiden directly. No calls, no messages, nothing in the mailbox. It was only through the natural cracks in shared social circles that the updates eventually reached me. I didn't ask for them, I didn't want them, but information has a way of slipping through the walls you build. It was Mark, a colleague of mine, who also happened to know a few people at Aiden's firm, who finally brought everything into the open. We ran into each other during a late lunch, and after some catching up, he gave me a certain look. The kind where someone knows something they think you'll want to hear, even if they shouldn't say it. "Pamela," he began cautiously, "have you heard what's happening with Aiden's office?" I didn't look up from my salad. "No, and I'd prefer not to." "You might want to make an exception this time." His tone gave me pause. I exhaled, closing my fork on the plate. "All right, tell me." Mark lowered his voice slightly. "Julianne is gone, transferred. London office. They announced it last week." I let the words settle. Julianne, the center of all that energy. Aiden had wrapped himself in the woman who seemed to energize him more than I ever could, had apparently packed up her charisma and left the continent. "Interesting," I finally said. "When did she tell Aiden?" "That's the best part," Mark said, trying not to grin. "She didn't. He found out through the company-wide memo. She ghosted him before hopping on the plane. People say she stopped talking to him weeks before her transfer." I blinked slowly as the implications hit. "So she didn't just leave him behind, she made sure he wasn't even in her rear view." Mark nodded. "Oh, it gets worse. Apparently Aiden tried to get closer to her once you were out of the picture, but she wasn't having it. Rumor is she got bored once the challenge was gone. She told a few people he was clingy and unprofessional. The exact words she used were, 'Hold on.'" Mark leaned back as he searched his memory. "He's nice, but he's dull. I thought there'd be more spark." A bitter, humorless laugh bubbled in my chest. "That sounds like her." And ever since she left, Aiden's been a mess. Missing deadlines, fighting with HR, drinking too much at work parties. He cried in a bathroom stall once someone recorded the audio on accident. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But something settled inside me, a heavy truth sliding into place like the final piece of a puzzle. Aiden had gambled everything on Julianne's attention, and she hadn't even bothered to play the same game. That whole situation, Mark added, has made him kind of a cautionary tale around the office. I took a sip of water. It tasted clearer than I expected. "Thanks for telling me," I said simply. And I meant it. Not because I wanted validation, I'd already moved past that, but because hearing the truth stripped the last lingering shadows of doubt from the corners of my mind. My instincts hadn't just been correct. They had been precise. Over the next few weeks, Maya from HR, the friend who had convinced me to join her team on the library renovation project, filled me in on small updates without me asking. Aiden looked drained. Aiden was making mistakes. Aiden was avoiding eye contact with coworkers. Every piece of news carried the same pattern. He had built his emotional house on Julianne's fire, and the building had burned down before he even realized she'd struck the match. Meanwhile, my life was moving forward in ways that felt natural, not forced. I'd regained my appetite. I'd made new architectural sketches that actually excited me. Even the silence in my apartment felt like a friend now, instead of an accusation. And then there was Connor. I met him through the library restoration project. He was in charge of coordinating with the city's permits department, a soft-spoken man with steady brown eyes and a calmness I didn't recognize in myself yet, but found surprisingly grounding. He asked thoughtful questions. He listened without interrupting. He never made jokes that required explanations or secret meanings. He wasn't dramatic, he wasn't intense, he wasn't addictive. He was stable. And at that point in my life, stability didn't feel boring. It felt like a luxury. Connor asked if I wanted to grab dinner after one of our late work sessions. It wasn't a grand gesture, no flirtation, dripping off every syllable, no dazzling charisma meant to sweep me off my feet. Just a simple, sincere invitation. For the first time in months, I said yes to something that wasn't tied to pain or recovery. Just yes. I didn't compare him to Aiden. I didn't look for hidden red flags in every word. I didn't expect him to fill any void. I wasn't looking for a replacement. I was simply allowing myself to exist in a life that wasn't tangled in someone else's chaos. But as my life grew clearer, Aiden seemed to be fraying apart. Mutual friends reported that he'd started skipping work lunches, avoiding gatherings, and snapping at coworkers. He seemed convinced Julianne would call him, message him, explain everything, but she never did. He was learning the hard way that some people thrive on the chase, not the commitment. One night, after a quiet dinner with Connor, I sat alone in my apartment and realized something significant. Aiden's downfall no longer satisfied me, nor did it upset me. It simply didn't matter. His choices had built the reality he was now living in, and his consequences didn't require my attention. For the first time, I let the disinterest settle, recognizing it as a sign of healing. But I didn't know then that he would try to break the silence. And when he finally did, he wouldn't be the same Aiden I had once known. It happened on a Tuesday morning, one of those cool, clear days when the city feels unusually calm. I had just finished an early site check-in and stopped by the small coffee shop near my office, the one with the quiet corner tables and the barista who always remembered my order without asking. I was scrolling through emails while waiting for my Americano when I sensed someone step up beside me. I didn't look up at first. I assumed it was another customer, but then I heard a voice I knew too well, strained, unsteady, stripped of its usual confidence. Pamela. I turned. It was Aiden. For a moment, I didn't even recognize him. He looked thinner. His suit wrinkled, the dark circles under his eyes barely hidden by concealer. His hair, usually styled with care, was flattened unevenly, like he had run his hands through it too many times. He stood there holding a cup of tea with both hands, knuckles pale, as if the warmth were the only thing keeping him grounded. Aiden, I said evenly. My voice came out more neutral than I expected. No anger, no affection, no nostalgia, just acknowledgement. I knew you came here before work, he said with a fragile smile that didn't reach his eyes. I was hoping maybe I'd catch you. I'm busy, I replied, stepping to the side slightly. I have a meeting soon. He nodded quickly, a jittery movement. Just 5 minutes, please. 5 minutes to talk. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes. Once upon a time, he had filled my entire life, my mornings, my evenings, my thoughts. Now he wanted 5 minutes, and even that felt like more generosity than I owed. I didn't respond, I just waited. Aiden swallowed hard. Things haven't been good, he began. Julianne ruined me, Pamela. I mean, she actually ruined me. He glanced around, lowering his voice, hoping for sympathy. She told everyone I was clingy, that I was obsessed with her, that I was unprofessional. She iced me out. I didn't even know she was transferring until the memo went out. Everyone at work thinks I'm... He exhaled shakily. They think I'm pathetic. The words hung between us. He waited for me to rush in with empathy, the way I once would have. When I didn't, he looked confused, almost offended. I'm struggling, Pamela, he continued. Really struggling. I'm sorry things have been difficult, I said. The words were polite, almost formal. They weren't cruel. They simply didn't carry the emotional weight he wanted. That small distance, those 2 inches of emotional space I had reclaimed, hit him harder than any shouting match ever could. You don't care, he whispered, stunned. After everything we've been through, after 3 years, you just don't care. He reached out, trying to touch my arm, but I stepped slightly back, just enough to avoid contact. The movement was subtle, but the meaning was clear. Aiden, I said softly, you didn't come here for me. You came here because your life got hard. His eyes widened, a mixture of hurt and disbelief. You're lonely, I continued. You're struggling. You're scared. And you're looking for the version of me who used to hold everything together for you when things got messy. But I'm not that person anymore. That's not true, he said quickly, voice cracking. I came here because I miss you. I miss what we had. I miss us. I shook my head. You miss the stability. You miss the convenience. You miss being cared for without having to face what you did. He looked down, shoulders curling inward. He tried again, desperation seeping into every word. Pamela, we can start over. Dinner, just dinner. Please. One chance. I promise I'm different now. I studied him for a moment, not the man he had been, but the man standing before me now fragile and scrambling for footing. But sympathy isn't the same as trust, and empathy isn't the same as reconciliation. You're not different, I said quietly. You're hurting, and you want someone to catch you before you fall. But catching you was never supposed to be my job. He blinked rapidly like he couldn't accept it. So that's it. You're just going to walk away. Yes, but I deserve closure, he insisted, his voice rising slightly. You can't just erase everything and act like I meant nothing to you. That's heartless. My coffee was ready. The barista called out my name. I didn't move yet. I looked at Aiden, fully letting the final truth settle. You know I said you should actually thank Julianne. He stared baffled. What, why? Because if she hadn't put her hand on your leg. That night, I answered, I might have married you. I might have spent the rest of my life with someone who thinks loyalty is optional and honesty is negotiable. She showed me exactly who you were, and she did it before it was too late. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There were no words left for him to use. I stepped toward the counter, picked up my coffee, and turned back to him one last time. Good luck, Aiden. His eyes filled with panic. Pamela, please. But I walked out before he could finish, the door swinging shut behind me. The morning air was crisp, the city just waking up. My phone buzzed with a message from Connor, asking if I was still up for dinner at the new Thai place tonight. I typed back, sounds perfect. See you at 7. I slipped my phone into my bag, took a long breath, and headed toward my office. I didn't look through the coffee shop window. I didn't need to. Whatever expression was on Aiden's face no longer had any power over me. He was just a chapter I'd finished reading, and I had an entire story still ahead of me. In the weeks after the coffee shop encounter, life settled into a rhythm that felt quietly solid. Not perfect, not euphoric, but grounded in a way I hadn't realized I'd been craving. I went to work without the knot in my stomach that used to appear any time my phone buzzed. I came home to an apartment that finally felt like mine again, clean, uncluttered, calm. The space no longer echoed with tension or the emotional noise that had once seeped in from every direction. It wasn't that Aiden had disappeared entirely. Mutual friends would occasionally mention him in passing. He's not doing great, they'd say. He keeps asking about you, someone else would add. I nodded politely and moved on. His story and mine had diverged, and for the first time I felt no pull to check where his path had led him. My own path was taking me somewhere better. The library restoration project gained momentum, and with it came more late nights at the drafting table, more opportunities to immerse myself in the kind of work that reminded me why I loved architecture in the first place. There was something poetic about it, rebuilding a space meant for learning, reflection, and community at the same time I was rebuilding myself. Connor continued to be a steady presence, not overwhelming my life, but weaving into it with small, thoughtful gestures. He brought homemade soup when he heard I'd skipped lunch. He sent photos of interesting building facades he passed on his morning runs. When we talked, he actually listened. No dismissive sighs, no half-hidden irritation, no subtle condescension. Just genuine curiosity and attentive silence. I didn't rush anything with him. I didn't need to. The pace felt natural, organic. Sometimes we grabbed dinner after work. Sometimes we didn't speak for 2 days while we were both busy. There were no games, no guessing, no competition. Just two people learning each other, slowly, intentionally. One evening, as I sat at my drafting table sketching the updated floor plan for the children's reading area, I realized something. I no longer felt the urge to brace myself for impact. I wasn't waiting for a shoe to drop or for someone to twist my words or ask me to shrink myself. For the first time in a long while, I was breathing without caution. It was a small revelation, but it hit with surprising force. In the quiet, I thought back to the beginning, to the late-night text I had seen glowing on the nightstand, to the dismissal that followed, to every moment I had doubted myself, because I trusted someone else's explanations more than my own instincts. I thought about the gala, the way the world had gone silent under that tablecloth, and the long walk out of that ballroom where I hadn't looked back. I also thought about Julianne, not with anger, not with resentment, but with a strange sense of gratitude. She had shown me a truth I wasn't ready to see, a truth that had freed me. And Aiden, well, he had shown me something too. That love built on avoidance, denial, and half-truths will collapse long before the final crack appears. That loyalty means nothing if it requires you to betray yourself first. that someone can care for you but still choose to prioritize their ego, their validation, their temptations over your trust. People aren't buildings. You can't reinforce them with steel beams or prevent foundational issues with better materials. But the lessons I learned through architecture still applied when you see a crack forming. Ignoring it won't stop the damage. You either repair it honestly or accept that the structure isn't meant to last. I chose not to live in a collapsing building, and I chose not to rebuild one that had already crumbled. As the project neared completion, the library director invited us to a small after-hours gathering to celebrate the progress. Connor stood beside me under the warm amber lights near the newly restored archway. He looked over the blueprints I held and smiled. "You did good work here," he said, his voice soft but certain. "We did," I corrected. He smiled again. No ego, no posturing, just a man content to share the credit. We walked through the quiet halls, the faint scent of fresh paint lingering in the air. Children would sit here soon, flipping through storybooks. Teenagers would study for exams. Old men would read newspapers. People would build moments and memories in a space that had once been falling apart. It felt right that my own rebuilding had mirrored this place so closely. When the evening wrapped up, Connor walked me to my car. Before I got in, he paused. "Pamela," he said gently, "you seem lighter these days." "I feel lighter," I admitted. He nodded, eyes warm. "You deserve that." Later at home, I set the final blueprint sheet on my desk. It was labeled Children's Wing Final Structural Revision. I traced the lines with my fingers, the clean geometry, the clarity, the purpose. It reminded me of something I had nearly forgotten. I was designing something new now, not just the library, my life. A life built intentionally with strong boundaries, honest foundations, and no more compromises carved out of fear or longing. A life where I trusted my instincts. A life where I didn't shrink myself to soothe someone else's insecurities. As I switched off the lamp, I realized the last remnants of that old ache, the one tied to betrayal, to confusion, to gaslighting, had finally dissolved. I wasn't looking back anymore. I was standing on my own blueprint, and for the first time, the ground beneath me felt steady.